This week, we're going into the hells and realms of heaven, part 2. And we're going to have some other interesting takes on the history of each belief. But last week, we did go over most of the realms of hell and the heavenly realms. We discussed the descriptions of each of them that was written in the ancient world. As we seen in the last program, part 1, many of the ancient beliefs reflect the same teaching with just a few variables. As time went on throughout history, humans, people, have simplified a lot of the teachings that were handed down in everyone's belief. Everyone, that is why it is so important to research information and learn. Here's one I'm going to throw at you tonight. I'll bet you didn't even know this. Do you know, and you could Google it, you could research it. Do you know there are more than 4,200 religions on Earth? I'm going to say that again. Did you know there are more than 4,200 religions in the world? Look it up. It will amaze you. Everyone, when you research, regardless of what some persons tell you, you do not compromise when you research your own belief. Stay in your belief. Get deeper in your belief, but broaden your knowledge. Then apply it with the spiritual knowledge that you already have to your life. And start your spiritual path. Start paving your road for your life. Remember, everyone, God is infinite. He is never finite. The problem is, throughout history and even current, humans tried to make God finite. But he's definitely not. God is everything and everywhere. If he has no beginning and no end, how could humans try to make him finite? How could we, as individuals, think we know it all? I don't. And I tell everybody, if the universe is expanding every day, and it's getting bigger and bigger, the knowledge that is within the universe is way beyond our comprehension, everyone. But God knows it all. He's the one that made it. Now, just like last week, as I stated, this program is not to offend anyone or go against anyone's beliefs or views. This topic that we are going over tonight is to show the comparisons of the beliefs that exist today. And if you have children, at the beginning of this program, probably the first 12 minutes, let them go play somewhere. Because I don't like to talk about things that are serious in nature in front of children. There's one more hell that we did not cover. There's many more, but I'm hitting the top ones from last week into this week. And I'd like to discuss it tonight. So let's go to Realm 1, Stage 1. Remember, I said, everyone, last week that each realm has 9 stages. That there are 7 realms that is known. The realms above Realm 7. They know there's realms, but no one, not even the ancient yogis or sages, even through meditation, has never went beyond that. So let's go into Realm 1, Stage 1. This realm, everyone, is the one where the sinner is dragged by the Lord of Death's messengers into a steaming, jagged rock-like tunnel. And they drag him deeper and deeper down, which seems to the sinner like an eternity. Every step the sinner takes, their feet is severely burnt in that tunnel. When they reach the entrance, the Lord of Death's messengers stop, and they forcefully make him look down. And when the sinner looks down, every part of their being is shaking uncontrollably. The messengers hold their head, and the sinners are forced to see what lies ahead before they are thrown in. Seeing the sinners that already reside in this hell are laying there with their hands and feet staked to the ground with thick copper rods that are actually anchored deep within the smoldering rocks. And the sinner's arms and legs are wrapped with steaming chains. Then all of a sudden, these fierce creatures come up from the lake of fire, and they start to aggressively eat the flesh off the whole body. The sinners were screaming in agonizing pain, while the fierce creatures eat everything, only to leave the skeleton on the rock. Then the creatures recede back into the lake of fire. Then all the flesh, the sinners are watching this, all the flesh is restored back onto the body of that sinner again. And with the body and his mind fully conscious again, then it starts all over again. Then again and again for many years until their sins are eradicated. This hell is called the flesh-eating hell. So since from part 1, and now we're in part 2, since we talked and went over the descriptions of each of the realms, well, why don't we take a look at the ancient beliefs and see what they actually individually thought. What are the realms? What are the hells? And how did they look at it? And how was it handed down throughout all of these thousands of years. So let's look at the ancient Egyptian belief. With the rise of Osiris during the Middle Kingdom, he offered, even to his humblest followers, the prospect of eternal life, with more becoming the dominant factor in determining a person's fate. At death, a person faced judgment by a tribunal of 42 divine judges. Now, I want to go over that again. At death, a person faced judgment by a tribunal of 42 divine judges. If they had led a life in conformance with the precepts of who they call Goddess Mat, who represented truth and right living, the person was welcomed into what they called the heavenly reed fields. If a person, when they passed, if found guilty, the person was thrown to Ammit, which in translation means the devourer of the dead, and would be condemned to the lake of fire. The person taken by the devourer is subjected first to terrifying punishment and then annihilated. These depictions of punishment may have influenced medieval perceptions of the inferno and hell via early Christian and Coptic texts. Purification for those considered justified appears in the descriptions of Flame Island, where humans experienced the triumph over evil and rebirth. For the damned, complete destruction into a state of non-being awaits. There is no suggestion of eternal torture. The weighing of the heart in Egyptian mythology can lead to annihilation. Divine pardon at judgment always remained a central concern for the ancient Egyptians. Modern understanding of Egyptian notions of the hells relies in 6 ancient texts, and I'm going to let you know what the texts are. 1. It's called the Book of Two Ways. You can also find it under the Book of the Ways of Rose-Ta. The second book is the Book of Amdut. The other name in English, the Book of the Hidden Room, Book of that which is in the underworld. The third book is called the Book of Gates. The fourth book, and everybody's heard of this, I know they have. If you watch History Channel and all these big programs, the Book of the Dead. The other name, translated, Book of Going Forth by Day. The fifth book is the Book of the Earth. And the sixth book is the Book of Caverns. So people, now you've heard, and as we go along, I want you to keep remembering what I said about the other belief. This is very important as we keep going. So let's look now at the Greek and Roman beliefs. In classic Greek mythology, below heaven, earth, and what they call Pontus is Tartarus. Now in Greek, they say Tartaros, which means a deep place. It is either a deep, gloomy place, a pit, or abyss, used as a dungeon of torment and suffering that resides in Hades, and what they consider Hades, the entire underworld, with Tartarus being the hellish component of that underworld. In Gorgias, Plato in 400 BC wrote that souls of the deceased were judged after they paid for the crossing of the river of the dead. Now I know people, if you're fascinated in history, you've heard of the Book of the Dead. And then you also hear that you have to pay the boatman to get across the river. So let's look at that for a little bit. And why did they believe that? It is stated in Greek mythology and Roman mythology, Charon and Charon. In Greek, this is what they say is a psychopomp. A psychopomp is the ferryman of Hades who carries souls of the newly deceased across the rivers of Styx, that's the name, and Acheron, that divided the world of the living from the world of the dead. A coin to pay Charon for passage usually was sometimes placed in or on the mouth of the deceased. And sometimes, I know you've all heard this, other beliefs would place the coins on both eyes when they are buried. Some scholars say that those who could not pay the fee, or those whose bodies were left unburied, had to wander the shores for 100 years until they were allowed to cross the river, and those who received punishment were sent to Tartarus, which was the hell that they believe in. As a place of punishment, it could be considered a hell. The classic Hades, on the other hand, is more similar to the Old Testament Sheol. The Romans later adopted these views that we are talking about. And if you have done some research, you will see that most religions talk about having to cross the river. Isn't that kind of ironic? Because as we start going through this, you'll be saying, but that sounds a lot like the other belief. And then some people will say, well, you know, they probably copied from one another. Well, one thing that I need you to look at, we just talked about the Egyptian belief. Then we jumped over to Greek and Roman. Now we're going to jump to ancient Africa. People, they didn't have back then social media. They didn't have mail couriers. They didn't have telephone. A lot of these beliefs back in the ancient world They were thousands and thousands of miles apart. I want you to think about that. So the hell of Swahili mythology is called Kuzimu. It is believed to be developed in the 7th or 8th century under the influence of Muslim merchants located on the East African coast region. This hell is imagined as a very cold place. So let's take a look at that. Now we're talking the ancient Africa. Last week, when we covered the 3 lower realms, which each is divided by 9 levels, and we went over all the major ones. Do you remember when we were talking about some of them were fiery hells? Some of them were cold? Here we hear it again, but it's on the other side of the earth. Serer religion rejects the general notion of heaven and hell. In Serer religion, acceptance by the ancestors who have long departed is as close to any heaven as one can get. Rejection and becoming a wandering soul is a sort of hell for one passing over. The souls of the dead must make their way to Jannah, the sacred dwelling place of the soul. Only those who have lived their lives on earth in accordance with the Serer doctrines will be able to make this necessary journey and thus accepted by the ancestors. And those who can't make it and cannot make the journey become lost and wandering souls. But in their belief, they do not believe that they burn in hellfire. So what about the native beliefs? Well, the hells of the Americas. And it was included in the Aztec belief, which is Mictlan, Inuit religions, Ativan, and the Yanomami religions, Chobarowaka. In the Mayan religion, Mentno is the dangerous underworld, and that underworld has 9 levels. So let's do a comparison here. Remember last week, we were talking about each realm has 9 levels. See the comparison? And these are the Mayans. The road into and out of it is said to be a steep, thorny, and a very forbidding place. Ritual healers would intone back then healing prayers, banishing diseases to Metno, which of the Popol Vuh, which is their ancient text, describes the adventures of the Maya hero twins in their cunning struggle with the evil lords of Metno. The Aztecs believed that the dead traveled to Mictlan, a neutral place found far in the north. There was also a legend of a place of white flowers which was always dark, and it was the home of the gods of death. It is believed that the journey to Mictlan took 4 years, and the travelers had to overcome difficult tests, such as passing a mountain range. A lot of you would be saying, why is that difficult? He's just passing the mountain range. But the difference is, when they were passing the mountain ranges, it is where the mountains were clashing into each other. They were just crushing back and forth. And a field where the wind carried flesh-scraping knives, and a river of blood with fearsome jaguars. So let's make another comparison. Remember when we talked about the hell last week? And the people in the hell, when they were they're running helter-skelter all through the hell. And then they would see a tree near the forest, and they would all try to run towards that tree, and they would see the leaves. But then the wind would blow, and when the leaves came down onto the center, they were razor blades and would cut the center into pieces. So do you see the comparison now? From deep in the east to the Aztecs with their flesh-scraping knives. Let's move on. Let's look at Judaism. The World Review of the Ancient Hebrews, as reflected in the Hebrew Scriptures, distinguished between the world above, which is the heavens, and it's called the Shamayim, as the dwelling place, a Yahiva, and the earth, the two compromising and comprising the universe of God's creation. The creation narrative of Genesis 1 through 3 portrays the heavens and the earth as the whole of God's creation. Under the earth in Judaism was Sheol. The ambiguous term, Sheol, was used at times to refer to the grave or tomb itself, and at other times to indicate an obscure land of shadows, which some called the realm of the dead. Existence there was understood in largely negative terms, since in Sheol, the spirit, or breath of life, which they called Ra, through which human beings were endowed by God with life, was thought to have departed. Prior to the Babylonian exile of 597 BCE, the dead were not thought of as having an existence in which individual identity was preserved beyond life on earth, but rather was conceived as a faceless collective existing in a joyous realm. Let's compare that now. Last week, in part 1, we talked about the realm that was granted to go up in realms 6 and 7 to where their bodies were as light as clouds. And you could see the astral outline of the bodies. And everything is so pleasant, so peaceful, so beautiful. But it describes that when you look at those individuals, you don't see a face. Isn't this what this is saying too? Let's go on a little further. With the rise of Judaism in the period following the 5th century BCE, the Jewish understanding of heaven as an ideal relationship of the righteous with God was informed both by intercultural influences and by continuing efforts to unfold the meaning and import of the covenant relationship between the community and God. For example, life after death had been clearly and definitely envisioned by the Zoroastrians of Persia as involving a judgment of individuals at death. So remember, I'm going to repeat that. The Zoroastrians of Persia as in involving a judgment of individuals at death. The righteous were destined to enjoy the forever in the presence of God, in the realm of what they called the unending light, while the unrighteous were condemned to a torturous hell. Everyone, doesn't that sound familiar? Let's go on. The Greeks, both in religions such as the Orphic cults and in the thought of major philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle, stressed the immortality of the soul. By the 2nd century BCE, both the resurrection of the dead and an event of final judgment were affirmed in most circles of Jewish thought. Heaven came to be regarded as the destiny of the righteous, those in vital covenant with the relationship with God. Multiple heavens was written about, 7 up to 10. Doesn't that sound familiar? Masonic expectations, which developed in the centuries immediately before and following the dawning of what they called the Common Era, were often associated with affirmations of the resurrection of the dead and final judgment. With the righteous destined for a heavenly paradise, in association with these developments, a place of punishment, which was called Gehenna, was thought to await the unrighteous ones after death. Though the period of punishment was limited in accordance with the degree of seriousness of one's sins. Traditional Judaism views the final destiny of humans in terms of the 3 doctrines of recompense, immortality, and resurrection. Informed by the demand of conscience that virtue be rewarded and wickedness be punished. The tradition holds that even if one does not encounter equity during the earthly life, it will nonetheless be met with the afterward consequences. The interpretation of the actual form of immortality, however, is permitted wide latitude in the tradition, with deathlessness as preserving individual identity and awareness, with the attending literal images. So what they did with the actual teachings, they came up with the two, with the images of paradise and then Gehenna, which is hell. Alternatively, as a state that is impersonal and without consciousness. Similarly, resurrection had been understood as a climatic event, physically reanimating the dead and including final judgment of bliss or damnation, and also as an eternal event through which of the resurrected is transfigured into a pure spirituality. Can you see where a lot of these kind of link together? And as I said at the beginning of the program, we're going to see that a lot of them are similar, but they have little variables in between. So let's go to ancient, at the beginning of Christianity. The cardinal import of heaven and hell as components of the Christian religious vision is clearly evident in the New Testament. Portrayal of the completion of God's redemptive activity consummated in the manifestation of a new heaven and new earth. Not only is heaven envisioned in early Christianity as the fulfilling state of bliss and reconciled relationship with God, of which the followers of Jesus Christ are assured, but it is also the abode of the divine, where Jesus dwelled before his earthly life and to which he proceeded following his death and resurrection. Essential to the Christian confidence in a heavenly life after death, in which the total uniqueness of human personality is preserved, is the affirmation that God will make it possible, the resurrection of the dead. This belief, to a lot of the Christian scholars, is to be distinguished from the Greek notion, especially of Plato and Aristotle, of the immortality of the soul, understood as rationality. The reality of hell as the arena presided over by Satan and his angels, and as the destiny of the cursed, was assumed by early Christians and frequently appears in the New Testament writings. Matthew 25, 1 through 46. This teaching has been taken literally by many Christian thinkers throughout the centuries, though alternative views have occasionally been expressed. Origen, which was in the 3rd century BCE, for example, understood hell to involve not the eternal punishment of the curse, but punishment of such duration as was necessary to provide for the restoration of all to the presence of God. So now, let's go a little deeper. Let's look at Roman Catholic. Hell is deemed to be a state of unending punishment for the unrepentant who die without the grace of God as transmitted through the sacraments. This state is characterized both by the absence from God's presence and by the suffering of fire and other tortures. The Roman Catholic concept of purgatory, defined by the Councils of Florence in 1439 and Trent 1545 to 1563, envisioned an intermediate state after death during which there's an opportunity for the expiation of venial sins and the compensatory punishment for mortal sins, thus providing for the ultimate restoration of fellowship with God. This teaching, likely informed by the Jewish notion of Gehenna and the Greek notion of the realms of Hades, is correlative with rituals of the dead, prayers and oblations intended to assure their full expiation, last rites. Salvation is understood in the Roman Catholic tradition to be a process begun in early life and continuing in life beyond death, through which there will ultimately be a realization of the beatific vision, a heavenly state of full and unqualified awareness of the presence of God, a state of spiritual perfection that cannot be attained during the earthly pilgrimage. The significance and import of the Christian teaching about heaven and hell has nowhere been given more powerful and imaginative expression than in Dante's masterful poem, the Commedia, completed in 1321. Eastern Orthodox Christianity, in sharing the teaching that hell is a destiny of eternal fire and punishment awaiting the curse and unredeemed following the last judgment, and that heaven is the ultimate destiny of the redeemed, has placed full emphasis on the resurrection of Jesus Christ as assuring the resurrection of the faithful. In the Quran and the traditions of Islam's are manifold descriptions of heaven and hell that are expressive of the centrality of judgment as an aspect of Muslim religious belief. Perfect justice is one of attributes of God, will be disclosed at the last judgment following resurrection. God's judgment will be pronounced on the basis of an expansive record of each person's deeds. Remember last week, everyone, we talked about the life chart. Some beliefs call it the Akashic records. Well, they're talking about it here. Overriding the demerits of the believer's evil deeds will be support provided by the Muslim confession. Subscribe to, and it's from the heart. There is no God but God, and they believe Muhammad is his prophet. That judgment, in turn, will be followed by the entrance of the believers into heaven, relegation of the infidels to hell. Everyone, they talk about the bridge, and the righteous will be able to cross the bridge, but the infidels will fall off the bridge into hell. This is a quote, and it's a Quranic description of punishment, and they also call it Gehenna in the following passage. All this before the solid awaits and ill resort. Gehenna, wherein they are roasted, and evil cradling. All this, so let them taste it, boiling water and pus, and other torments of the like kind, coupled together. And that's from the Surah 38, verses 55 through 58. Traditional Islam adheres to a conviction that the sufferings in hell will be unending, though there are suggestions of a purgatorial realm from which, after a time, Muslims in the need of purification to the Ummah, the Muslim community, will be recovered. Both heaven and hell are subdivided into 7 regions in Muslim teaching. Last week, everyone, didn't we talk about the 7 realms? Here we're seeing it again. Isn't it ironic? And they said there is, with an 8th region or realm added to the heavenly realm of the blessed. So now they're saying there's one above realm 7, which we discussed last week. So as you've heard about all these various hells and heavenly realms, there is a lot of similarities with some variables. There is. But even though we have covered most of the hells, the point that we are trying to get across everyone is that it's never too late to try to live a more righteous, helping humanity. Never gossip, which we're going to go over that sin in a later program because that's a huge one. Control the anger within, jealousy, hatred, lusting over others, committing adultery, incest, lying. Let me go over that for a minute. Some people say, I don't lie. I just tell little white lies. People, I don't care what color you give that lie. A lie is a lie. Being deceitful, greed, entering underhanded dealings, keeping a grudge, murder, rape, or committing physical or mental abuse. People, do you know how many of these are sins? I could be talking over 200 more that we have no clue in our everyday life that they're logged in as sins in every belief. And the reason I want to do this is because, none of us are perfect. None of us. We've all done wrong in our life. But if we're not told in depth the spiritual information, how can we try to better ourselves?